Good morning. This is the Innovation Conversation. I'm Kevin Coupe.
And I'm Tom Furphy.
So, Tom, there were a couple of stories that have popped up in the last few days that I thought were interesting, illustrating two sides of sort of where e-commerce has gone and where it might be going. And the first story was in the Financial Times, and it was about L'Oreal. And it was an interview with a woman named, I'm going to get this name wrong, I think it's Lubomira Roche, who's their chief digital officer. And I apologize to Ms. Roche if I've mispronounced her first name or her last name. And basically, she said that it has taken them 8 weeks to get where they thought it would take them 3 years to get. And that they're now looking at a world in which, you know, they're going to be doing 80% of their business online, either direct to consumer themselves or via Amazon or Walmart, and spending, at least 50% of their revenue of their marketing spend on that, as opposed to traditional ways. I guess that's the future.
Well, it makes sense. We've been kind of investing toward embedding that is the future that's coming. We saw the stat over the last couple of months where overall e-commerce as a percentage of retail, most of these studies are relatively close, but went somewhere from around 15-16% of retail to somewhere around 27 to 29% of retail. So almost doubled in 2 months. And I think most folks would have projected that doubling to occur in 2 to 3 years, 30% growth per year. And obviously the pandemic has forced people home. It's forced people to have to conduct commerce digitally. So it's made that number go up. And yeah, if that's where the people are, that's where I'm going to spend my marketing dollars. And, I think that there were some trends going into that where, marketers loved the efficacy of good digital advertising, right? You can really track it, right? What are the ads or messages I'm placing? How are people interacting with that? What's the outcome? How's that converting to purchase? It's a lot more measurable than traditional advertising is. It's a little bit of a wild west right now, and how much advertising is moving online and what's working and not working. And so I think it's going to take a little time for the techniques and the dollars to rationalize, but that's a pretty sound strategy for a brand like L'Oreal to be putting 80% into digital.
And I guess, cosmetics is in some ways uniquely positioned to sort of take advantage of technology tools, right? You must have seen some of this in terms of a lot of your work with Nordstrom, right? The ability for people to simulate effects, if that's the right term,
right?
Makeup, what do I know? Is really strong in that category. Tools have been developed for that process.
Yeah, tools have been developed. I would say for a while the tools were relatively crude and were not nearly as good as the experience would be of going into a store and trying on a color, and working with humans, either you human yourself with a mirror or an expert helping you with that. I do think over the last few years the tools have gotten a lot better. Yeah, we had Bevy Up, which was the technology that was in the hands of the Nordstrom stylists. So that was more about your overall look. It wasn't so much what you looked like wearing something, but it was using data around your likes, dislikes, and the iterative process of working with a human or not with a human to better curate your own assortment. And ultimately that became, a lot of the basis underneath the Nordstrom Local concept, right? Where it's more of a boutique showroom where you interact with a stylist, you have technology that guides your experience, and ultimately you're buying your products via the technology. I think cosmetics is is probably a little bit trickier than clothing overall would be. But I think that the strides that they made with the technology have been really good, like the ability to capture a good image of your face and the ability to properly represent the colors, within that, I think are really good. And, so discovery I think digital is now enhancing discovery in ways that it couldn't before. I still think there's a ton of value and good human interaction around that as well. So, I think there's going to be a place for that. But, if you can discover a broader range of products using technology and then, You can purchase them with the technology and put them on auto replenishment, with technology for, certain, looks and colors and varieties that work for you. It's a pretty compelling combination.
And I would imagine the tools are only going to get better, right?
Oh, of course.
Tools never get, rarely get worse. Tools only get better. And what I don't know about this, and maybe we'll get some email about this, is to what degree are women more adventurous in terms of being willing to try, new colors, new whatever shades, more than a lot of men would be. And I don't want, not all women are certainly like that. I'm married to a woman who I don't think is, would ever do that. And I know guys who change their styles all the time. So I don't want to get in trouble here. I wonder if there's a degree of adventurousness that in that category.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I mean, there must be, because women go into Nordstrom's or
look at the square footage, right? The square footage dedicated to that adventure is pretty massive.
And isn't the definition of a makeover is you're changing, you're trying something new. Right.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, it's also, I think those elements of beauty, particularly in your face and your look, that's really important. So I think making that leap to online, it can be daunting. I think, necessity is the mother of invention, and we've had a lot of necessity over the last, few months. We heard Jess Hoff from L'Oreal on our leadership summit, a couple of weeks ago, talking about even just her own self, right, and coloring her own hair for the first time. A lot of women would never have considered that in the past, but of course, many have gotten to the point where you had to try some new things. And, I think there'll be some word of mouth too. If a trusted friend has tried this technology and it's worked, and, you see that person and you see how good they look, you might be willing to give it a shot yourself.
And there's probably a good metaphor in there also for food stores, right? I mean, how many people could use for lack of a better term, a culinary makeover, right?
Absolutely.
Especially because nobody's going out to restaurants anymore, or haven't been. And how many people would use online tools that eventually could be translated into stores in certain cases to say, move outside your whatever your bubble happens to be. I'm not sure how many retailers out there might be using their tools. In other words, if roughly 30% of food sales are now online, how many retailers, and I mean, I guess the answer to this is almost none, are actually looking at the data and saying, okay, customer A buys these 5 things, but if they buy these 5 things, they probably like these other 5 things.
Totally.
Just might not know they exist, or might not know how to use them. We can expand the palette on which they're cooking if we make suggestions. I don't think anybody's doing that, but it seems to me that is a potentially robust place for the food industry to go.
I think it's a very ripe opportunity. There are companies out there that will do like meal planning and discovery, where you can explore recipes, build recipes, then that generates lists, off those. And you can set criteria around, likes and preferences and nutritional considerations and those kinds of things. So there are capabilities out there. The industry has been relatively slow to adopt them. Part of it is where the industry is in the e-commerce curve overall, and maybe not quite being ready for it. But I do think the acceleration of the last few months has set these types of companies and capabilities up for being used more. I always had very high hopes in the Bevy Up days for its application in the grocery space. Having your own digital assistant that knows your past purchase history, knows your likes and dislikes, maybe knows any wellness aspirations or nutritional considerations, right? Having that in there and then being able to explore the store, with that, being able to go to, a fishmonger or go to the butcher in the store, and then have that store associate be able to, on their digital device, see that, that profile of you and be able to help guide you, or work with a nutritionist in the store, right? I always felt like that kind of digitally assisted interaction had high potential. I think now digitally assisted interaction is crucial, right? As you look at the way the store model is going to evolve, with the higher cost to serve of e-commerce, stores are going to have to rationalize labor a fair amount from where they are today. And I know, you've written many times over the years that the notion of reducing labor is scary, because humans are a huge asset, for retailers, and you want to have that asset out there, being effective. I think having digital tools to help the staff that's in the store be more effective is important, and you can, ultimately have a little bit less labor in a store, but have that labor be more effective with the use of these tools and build a better customer experience.
Yeah. One last question about L'Oreal.
Yep.
So if you were advising them, what do they need to do? It seems to me, okay, they're talking about growing it from where it is now to like doubling or more their e-commerce distribution. But it seems to me, there's two ways to approach it, right? You can go after it, or you can kind of wait for it to come to you. I think it's a real mistake to wait for it to come to you, because it might go someplace else. Yeah. So how do they go about sustaining that growth? What would you tell them at a very high level that they need to do to say, okay, you want to get from 35% to 70%, here's how you go after that?
I ran the beauty business at Amazon way back in the day. One of the key reservations from the beauty brands, so this would apply to L'Oreal and anyone, was they had a fear of channel conflict, and if they invested in their own e-commerce or key retail platforms like Amazon, that would be off-putting to the retailers that have been their bread and butter, right? They always say, the number of doors that would be impacted. That's what they talk about in like the department store world. So, and that's pretty valid too, when 95% of your business plus is coming through those venues and it's growing. Nowadays though, all of those retailers that represented those doors all have significant aggressive digital strategies, right? They know they need to be there. L'Oreal and many other beauty brands realize they need to establish relationships with their end consumers. Their sites are a fantastic place to do that. They're investing in that. They're doing that. Take the learnings from there. Take, the innovation, things like their Modiface or Motiface. I'm not quite sure how it's pronounced. But bring those innovations out to the field. Retailers want that kind of collaboration. So be the innovator, right? Be fuel R&D for them. And I think that you can create a really symbiotic relationship. So as digital becomes more prevalent and the shift occurs, you're right there helping the retailer navigate that and setting yourself up as a preferred partner to that retailer in doing so.
But you'd agree that the wrong approach is to wait for it to come to you.
No, you can't wait for it to come to you. And frankly, it's there now. Any retailer of any size that, is valuable to you as a brand is all in on, they're all in on getting digital figured out. So it has already come to you, basically.
The other story I wanted to mention to you is this Bloomberg story, which basically talked about the idea that people who shop for cars, now that things are starting to open up around the country, defying some of the predictions that people would love the idea of buying cars online. In fact, people seem to want to go back to showrooms. They want to deal with, I can't imagine why. They really want to deal with car salesmen. And
did you see that they were the article said that they were the least trusted professional? They were even below attorneys and something else.
And probably journalists and politicians.
It was politicians and attorneys.
Yeah, politicians, attorneys, journalists, and car salesmen. But I found this fascinating because, and part of this, a lot of the story was focusing on California. So some of it may be local, because California has sort of a unique relationship with the automobile that other places don't have. But I wonder I would question the story in the sense that I wonder, are people really want to go see car salesmen, or are they just going because they do want to take that thing for a drive? Other than like a house in college, it's the big one of the biggest ticket items you'll ever buy in your life. So are they going in because they want to drive the car, but they're going to do all the research in advance and then actually do the actual purchase online? What do you think?
Well, I think it's a super high consideration purchase, right? I mean, other than education, housing, medical, which you kind of usually forced into making your purchase decisions there. But it's a high consideration purchase. So I think in a lot of cases, people do want to, look at the merchandise, see and feel the merchandise. I can pretty much, I mean, again, this is anecdotal, but we bought 5 cars and actually 6 cars in the last 3 years. 3 kid drivers, and plus we turned some over, and we did like 90+% of the process. Of course, you do it online, right? You're researching what do you want, what features are you looking for, what is the real market pricing, who has the inventory. So I think you come into the dealership pretty well armed, and then you'll obviously want to see the car or two that you had picked at that lot, right, and open it and feel it and drive it. But I've even found, like, when you're sitting at the salesman's desk, they'll pull up the same online listing that you looked at to do your research, right? So we have, a single unified set of data that we're all drawing from. But I do think, the high consideration nature of that purchase, people do want to ultimately, in a lot of cases, see and feel it. Although, firms like Carvana, and there's a fair amount of touchless and really human interaction less capability now in buying cars. You may find that over time that as people get comfortable doing more of it online, that they start to actually click buy without having seen it.
Well, and I wonder if, and it seems to me this maybe is a likely scenario, which is that car dealerships see a story like this and say to themselves, "Oh man, how great is this? They're coming back. They need us." But in fact, what they're not even acknowledging that in a lot of ways, the car dealership experience is the biggest friction point.
Oh yeah.
Car acquisition point. Right? I don't know anybody who really likes the car dealership they've dealt with. I mean, a few, right? But, and I haven't bought a car. We've leased a couple of cars over the last couple of years for my wife and daughter. We haven't bought a car in 6 years, the Mustang, and it'll be at least another 4 years before I replace it. But, but the worst part of it was the Ford dealership. I mean, they were terrible, and they were terrible on service. They were terrible on the whole thing. And so the idea, but if they would read a story like that and say, see, they need us, I think they would be missing the opportunity to say, we could be disintermediated out of this relationship
totally
easily, right?
Yeah.
Just by a car deal, just by if you use the Uber example or the Lyft example, right, where those drivers, by being friendly, talkative, having clean cars and a bottle of water, were able to and providing you with all the data online that you needed, right, about ordering the car, how much you paid, tip, the whole thing. They made it a frictionless experience. If some car dealership out there could become the Uber or Lyft of the car dealership business, right? Yeah. Just provide a more frictionless experience. Give me a bottle of water, really facilitate in a way that works for me as opposed for them. They will become the car dealer of choice in that whatever that brand happens to be. And I guess there's some limitations because there's only so many Ford dealerships in a market.
Yeah. Right. But I do agree. I mean, there's so much data out there now. I mean, even the historical, well, let me go talk to my manager about that price, right? And gosh, awful back and forth negotiation. I think that's becoming a lot less. I would say of the 5 cars we bought, probably 3 or 4 of them were from dealerships that said, they publish their rock bottom price. And we tried to push them on it, and they're like, no, that is the rock bottom price. And you could see by looking around, it really was. Like, they're, you always hope you could do a little better. So maybe get them to throw in like floor mats or, all weather floor mats or something like that, but, or some car washes, but I do think ultimately though, in any in any retail space where price becomes pushed down based on transparency, which is going to be most, it's that service and the way that service makes you feel that ultimately is going to differentiate, you as a store or dealership or seller, to your customers, and that's really going to carry the day for you.
And probably, again, a good metaphor for the food business, right? If you just assume the business is going to come to you and you don't work actively at making it putting less friction in the experience, doing all the things you need to do that we talked about with L'Oreal, that you develop a relationship, you use data, you become both relevant and resonant. If you don't do those things, you could get disintermediated.
Yeah, no, the days of the customer coming to you just because you're there, those are gone. Those are
Great.
gone.
Anyway, well, good innovation conversation. Thanks for watching. I'm Kevin Coupe.
And I'm Tom Furphy.
We'll see you next time, everybody.
Thank you.